Hello, my name is Debbie Boone, and I want to welcome you to my podcast, The Bend, where we explore how successful people navigated the path and emerged in a better place when life threw them an unexpected twist. It's inspired by one of my favorite sayings: the bend in the road is not the end of the road unless you fail to make the curve. These conversations will hopefully help you and inspire you to embrace your personal bend and to flourish. I hope you enjoy it, and if you need help with your own personal navigation and you're in veterinary medicine, please feel free to reach out to me at Debbie Boone to Manage Vets Consulting. Enjoy the bend and be inspired by our wonderful guest. Welcome. All right, well, welcome everyone to today's interview and session of The Bend. I'm very glad to have you all here. Today, my guest is Suzanne Thomas. Suzanne is an LVT, and she has all kinds of certifications: certified personal trainer, founder of Leading Veterinary Teams, a coaching and consulting firm, and she's an advocate for DEI in veterinary med, and then also speaks on topics like neurodiversity in leadership, setting professional boundaries, hallelujah, and the role of credentialed technicians and actually utilizing them and respecting them to the top of their license. So thank you very much to the audience for coming. And my name is Debbie Boone. I am also a speaker, trainer, and a champion of veterinary teams. And so on The Bend, what we like to do is talk to people who are changing the profession for the better or working really hard to do that. And being very forward thinking. And Suzanne is definitely one of those people. So thanks for coming on, Suzanne. I appreciate
Absolutely.
it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit about how you got started in the profession, not a deep dive, but just for curiosity, how do we get into vet med?
Yeah, the story of how I got into vet med is actually quite an interesting one. I didn't grow up in vet med like a lot of people did. I actually started off going to college for psychology. I thought that I wanted to help people, which funny enough, sort of what I do, right?
Mhm.
But I experienced a lot of trauma as a child, and I wanted to help people in the way that I didn't get help. Um, Giving them tools that I didn't have until much later in life. While I was in school, I actually switched to um, business because I was working in retail. I was actually working in a very philanthropic retail company that donated to organizations that were fighting sex trafficking with children and protecting rainforests and wildlife. It's really funny how things sort of all connect
Mhm.
with each other, and how I learned about the palm oil industry and the destruction of orangutan habitats through that. There's always like some sort of weaving of animals
Yeah.
throughout my life, but I was never really involved in working with animals until I was in my 20s, when I actually switched careers because in the 2008, 2009, anyone who was in America at that time knows that we experienced a pretty rough recession,
We
and
did.
the company that I was
Mhm.
working for started closing stores. And so it gave me an opportunity to pivot. And I went to my mom and I was like, what should I do? And she's like, well, you love animals. Maybe you should become a veterinarian. And I went to my now husband and I was like, what should I do? And he was like, you love helping people. Why don't you become a nurse? We happened to live in Dobbs Ferry, New York at the time, which is where Mercy College, now Mercy University, is. And they have a veterinary technology program.
Yes.
So in looking through things, I found that and was like, it's a mile away. It's like Kismet, right? So I enrolled in that program, started in 2010, and was fortunate enough to meet someone who got me a job in a really interesting hospital, because it was a hybrid hospital which had a GP, ER, and specialty. So I was exposed to everything really early on. And so while working there, it was primarily working ER overnight because I was also going to school. And I really fell in love with the nursing care. And so while I was on track for pre-vet, I switched over to vet tech because I was like, I want to be hands-on with the animals. When I graduated from school, I had the really awesome opportunity to work with Dr. Sue Ettinger. They hired me right on in oncology, and I never thought I'd be working with cancer patients, but I fell in love with the patients. I fell in love with the oncology care and the empathy that you learn through working with oncology. I worked there for a handful of years, and then in 2018 had twins. So that actually gave me another opportunity to pivot, and I transitioned into practice management. So back to leadership. And so in retail, I was in leadership, back to leadership. So I was managing a hospital in Westchester. Then I had the opportunity to manage a second hospital in Manhattan. And now I'm in multi-site leadership. So it's been a wild ride, but from retail to clinical practice now into leadership.
Yeah, yeah, it is. One of my friends gave an interview the other day to with Kristen Peck, and she talked about this zigzag path that life takes you on, and it's the truth. I was teaching a class to some pre-vet students at North Carolina State, and I went, "Look, I know that you have this mindset that I'm going to go to vet school."
Oh
I said,
yeah.
"But sometimes it doesn't work out like that, and sometimes that's okay." Because the path can look like a drunken sailor on Saturday night. I mean, it really can. And everything that you pick up from all those jobs is something that you can utilize when you
Yeah.
get into the place that you need to be or where you're supposed to be. So, for me, I grew up in the restaurant business, and then I managed a fabric shop, and then I managed a retail jewelry store, and then I ended up selling a doctor a watch and ended up back at the hospital as the manager, even though my degree is in animal science and pre-vet. So it's just how you get there. But every single thing I picked up something,
Yeah.
looking at like advertising. They're not going to teach you how to do advertising in a veterinary hospital, but for retail, it's a thing. And then
Yeah.
inventory control in a jewelry department, inventory is big because you're dealing with $10,000 diamonds that are coming in
Yeah.
and out. So, you learn all those things and then you kind of bring them with you
Sure.
and use them in the job that you've got. So tell me about what inspired you to take all this knowledge that you had and then work to change veterinary medicine for the better. I read a lot of your posts on LinkedIn and listen to the stuff that you're talking about. And so there seems to be Ron Sosa is a friend of mine too. And so discussions about neurodiversity. Tell me how you kind of said, this is a topic I'm interested in and I want to talk about.
So that sort of happened by mistake. um, I was diagnosed with anxiety when I was a hospital manager. So, timeline wise, if you look at that timeline, I was a hospital manager in the middle of COVID. And so it's funny that you started off, talking about this, how this started during COVID. And so um, I was a hospital manager during COVID, and I had a panic attack in the middle of the hospital, and I was like, what is happening right now? And so I used my EAP, and I called literally in the middle of the hospital. Not a lot of people know this story, so here we are. And I picked up the phone and I was like, I know we have this EAP. I'm going to use it. And I called, and I actually was really fortunate because I was set up with the most amazing woman. I said I have a lot of trauma, right? And so that means there's a lot of weird stuff with therapists. And so I was really hesitant to meet someone and all of that. And I told her, I was like, I don't do the clinical stuff. Like, you can't talk to me like I know too much. You can't talk to me like that. You have to talk to me like a human. And she was like, yeah, we don't do that. So I was like, fantastic. I love you. We're wonderful. We still talk to this day. She's the most amazing person ever. But I was diagnosed with anxiety, subsequently also then diagnosed with ADHD, and my world has just turned upside down. I also have dyslexia, which is quite interesting because the more you learn about me, the more you're like, how have you navigated your life? Because not only was I an oncology technician, but which is very math heavy, but
Mhm.
I'm also getting my MBA with a concentration in accounting. So, hello, Suzanne,
Yes,
what's with you and being all numbers are always backwards for me, so
right.
that it takes me like triple the amount of time
Yep.
to do math than it does a normal
Yep.
person. Um, but I think being able to be open about the challenges that I've had has allowed me to be a better leader, has allowed me to be a better coworker, has allowed me to be a better wife, a better mom, a better friend, just navigate my life better because I'm like, hey guys, listen, it takes me a little bit longer to do certain things, but then there's other things that I'm going to excel at
Yeah.
way better than you are. So we balance ourselves out, we balance each other out, and where I excel, other people don't, and vice versa.
Mhm.
And so it just sort of came out one day in a conversation, and it happened to be the right person I was talking to, and that led me to Ron. That led me to Blend Vet. Well, I was talking to Blend Vet for other things, but it led me to a conversation with Blend Vet, which then led me to doing a micro learning with them. And so I never intended for neurodiversity to be something that I talk about on a grand scale, but here we are.
Yeah, here we are. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, I too am dyslexic, and until you got to figure I'm much older than you are, but when digital watches came out, I was so excited because I struggled with telling time. And my
Yeah.
mother was like, "What is wrong with you? I mean, who can't tell time?" But the face of a clock is inverted for me. My name, DB, is always
Mhm.
it's my initial. I write my initials. They're always backwards. I have to think about how to write D's and B's and make the little curls in the right spin. So I completely get the dyslexia. But my mom says, we didn't know anything about that when you were a little kid, right? I went,
Yeah.
no, nobody had any idea about stuff like that. So it gave me challenges with spelling.
Yeah.
But I'm a very rapid reader because I read in blocks and
Same.
and the other thing I think about it is I think we think differently in problem solving. I think we just see stuff in a different way than people who are not, dyslexic because
Yeah.
we are able to, I guess you struggle so much to try to live your life figuring out how to stuff, you become a really good problem solver
Yeah.
just by necessity more than anything else. And then
Yeah, and then with the ADHD, like on top of it, right? I didn't know I had ADHD until I was in my late 30s. And then so I you finally put a name to something
uh-huh.
and it all just starts to make sense.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, so that's why all of this pattern recognition, that's
Yeah.
why when it's not procrastination, it's just the way my brain works, right? Like
Uh-huh.
it's just, it puts this name to all of the things that I have done my entire life.
Mhm.
And, my husband's like, oh, you're just a messy person. I'm like, no, 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 that is my brain. And I'm like, look, we can actually set up systems. And look, I'm no longer a messy person. And
Uh-huh.
he's like, wow, this is amazing. Like, if we knew,
Right.
you
There's,
know,
there's
and
tools out there. If once you know,
yeah,
you can use the tools to
yeah.
my husband is funny because we share an office and his desk is completely clean with a pen on it. Now my desk, and he leaves it that way when he walks away from my desk. I am not. He's coming around. He says, "You're a pig." Sit down. I was doing a recording. So, but I have piles, but my piles are organized and I know where the piles
Right.
are, right? So don't mess with my piles. I know what's going on.
100%.
And I jump from place to place because I get bored with that. And then I
Hmm.
jump to something else and I get bored with that and move to something else. So, it's just to know yourself kind of thing.
Yeah.
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 So I'm curious I want to talk particularly about title recognition with you. Because I love what you did the other day. Somebody put an ad in, the vet tech, licensed or unlicensed. And basically every time I see this, I'm kind of screaming because it's not the same thing. And I have
Hmm.
had to, in my lectures, have people come up to me and go, but I've been doing this for 15 years. And I go, but you're not a licensed technician and you can't
Yeah.
call yourself that. You did not take the education and you didn't do the testing. And so you don't get to, I mean, for years and years and years, I was a very highly qualified hospital administrator, but I couldn't go call myself a CVPM because I hadn't done the work. So
Right.
you can't just do that. But I was curious, I'm curious, tell the story about the ad that you saw and what you did and what happened.
Yeah, so I was scrolling through LinkedIn as I often do. And a job ad popped up for, and I live in New Jersey, so often I'll get job ads. And because I'm a technician uh, in both New York and New Jersey, I will often get those job ads, even though I'm not looking for those
Hmm.
jobs anymore, right? And so a job ad popped up for a local ish corporation that it said a for a technician, but it said for a licensed or unlicensed technician. And then it had the how much it was, right? Whatever. I'm not gonna the
Yeah.
conversation that I even posted was not about the wage range because it was because of the way that it was written.
Right.
And then and then it said Manhattan. So I was like, so much is wrong there. Now, we could get into the specifics of title protection and all the things that is wrong with that, right?
Mhm.
That would go into a very deep hole, right? But there is one thing that I know very, very well, being a technician who has essentially grown up in vet med in New York, is that New York has title protection. And so you cannot call yourself, and I even looked at because I was like, wait, let me just double check before I post this online and say something that I am mistaking. I went on ChatGPT. I was like, let me just double check on Google. Let me just go. And then I was like, let me pull up the scope of practice. Let me go to the AVM. I was like, I checked all my sources because I was like, I don't trust anybody, right? So
Yeah.
I checked all my sources. I was like, let me, because make sure that my brain isn't like messing something up. And so I was like, no, no, no. I didn't make this up. You cannot call yourself a technician, a veterinary technician in New York State because it's title protected if you are not licensed. And so I just made a post and I blacked out the company and I blacked out a couple of other things that would make anyone who knows the company know that that was their particular, because it wasn't about that.
Right.
And so I made it so that you didn't necessarily know whose ad it was. And I posted about it. Um, and just saying, like, we have to do better, right? And it wasn't an argument about title protection in general. It was an argument about if you are in a title protected state, you got to do better because
Mhm.
we're not, what are we doing here?
Right.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
you,
There's no point of having the title protected if this is what's going, if you're
well,
not going
this
to follow
isn't
the rules.
new. It's
Right.
not a new type. Like, I've been credentialed in New York State since I took the test in 2013. I graduated in 2014. So
Mhm.
technically since 2014, right? And it's been that way since before I was credentialed. So, like, this isn't new. We're going on I've been credentialed more than 10 years. So,
Mhm.
this is not new. And why? We should know better, right? And so I posted about it. I got a whole ton of things about it. Um, Lots of comments. I posted it on Instagram and TikTok as well as LinkedIn too, just because I was livid. Lots and lots of comments. And then I think it was like 2 days later, I get a private message from the nursing director of that organization saying, hey, we know each other kind of peripherally. We've never spoken. I saw your post and I was really hoping that that was not from our company. And when I took a look, it was. And so I have done a lot of work to work with our team to elevate technicians and to have conversations around why this is important. And I immediately talked to our team, explained to them why we can't have this. We took it down, we updated it, and thank you for pointing it out. And I'll make sure that this doesn't happen again.
Mhm.
And I was absolutely speechless. I was like, holy crap. Like, I didn't even know how to respond because I was like, integrity exists?
Yeah.
Like, oh, what?
What?
I not expecting that at all.
Uh-huh.
And as I'm sure you can tell in this conversation, it's rare that I'm speechless. So I was just like, how do I respond to this? I I was like, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Holy cow, right? Like, how do you, whoa, a leader taking accountability, not getting defensive, not being like, who is this person attacking us? Like, what? So I was like, thanks.
Yeah.
Wow. Like,
Yeah.
and
Kudos
then
for
I was
owning your
like, hey, are
mistake.
you okay with me I was like, I said, like, I took all the things off on purpose. This wasn't about your company. Are you okay with me posting that you fixed it? And they said, as long as it remains anonymous
Mhm,
and confidential, I have no problem with that.
mhm.
And I was like, absolutely. Like, there's no reason. And then I had a couple people saying, I really want to know who this is so that I can, like, be excited about them. And I was like, I am happy to share with them that you want to know who
Uh-huh.
they are. They obviously follow me, so they'll see your comment. But I also have integrity. So
Right.
I'm not about to, like, drop that bomb
Yeah.
because, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. I love it. I think
yeah,
it's just such a great story that, we hear so much negativity in vet med.
yeah,
And I often think sometimes that our problem is more public relations than actual life. Because when
I
you talk to
know.
people, you're out there in the world a lot like we are, and you're talking to team members like, I really like my job. I mean, that's what people tell me all the time. I really love what I do. And then the squeaky wheels are the ones that are making a lot of noise out there in the universe. And that's not to say we don't have problems. We do. But I think any business has problems. You've worked
Yeah.
in other businesses. I've worked in other businesses. And no matter how good they are, there's still problems. And sometimes the problems are poor fit. Like the
Hmm.
people, I'm working on a article right now, and I've gotten some feedback that's been very interesting because the question I posed to my audience was, what is a toxic work environment? Because it's kind of like pornography, right? I'll know it when I see it. And but the answers have been very diverse because
Mm,
what's toxic to some is not toxic to others, and what people will tolerate, others won't. So
sure.
there's a chasm there where everybody just kind of dumps the word toxic into something that they don't like.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that everybody on the team doesn't like it. It's just
Yeah.
maybe it's not a good place for you because you don't have a tolerance for that kind of thing or whatever's going on in the world. So I think it's an interesting topic. Um,
Yeah.
so tell me a little bit about, your work personally, other than being working in clinics and being a leadership where you are. But tell me how you work to kind of impact veterinary medicine. What are your focuses to make vet med a better place?
Yeah. I mean, I think that I lean on tech utilization, but I use that, going to use this as a little bit of a weird segue.
Huh?
I use that to really talk about everyone. And so I think that when we talk about tech utilization, it gets ears listening because it's the hot topic, right?
Hmm.
Everybody wants to talk about, ooh, how do we use our text? Ooh, she's talking about text.
Uh,
But then they keep listening. And I'm like, we have to talk about everyone on the team being used at the top of their skill. And then
mhm.
they're like, oh, tell me more. And I'm
Uh-huh.
like, right. Because it's not just our technicians, right? Like, our technicians are wildly important. Don't get me wrong. We have data that supports that when we utilize our credentialed technicians, that we are able to bring more revenue into our hospitals.
Mhm.
And I have to speak both languages because I work in corporate vet med, right?
Mhm.
Like, I have to speak those languages. So you'll hear that kind of come from me. But there's also a lot of information and a lot that comes from also utilizing our reception team to the top of their skill. And maybe the top of their skill is down here today.
Mhm.
So we have to train them up
Upskill.
to here, right?
Mhm.
And I think that that gets lost in a lot of this
Oh yeah.
conversation.
Oh yeah.
And that's also the assistants, that's also the managers, that's also the doctors, it's everyone on, that's also the kennel staff. Like, I don't
Mhm.
want to forget anyone. There's
Right. Yeah.
hospitals that have all these weird titles. So
Yes.
whoever you are in your hospital, everyone on the team needs to be utilized at the top of their skill. And if we're not at that skill level, we need to bring them up to the skill
Mhm.
level that they are at, whatever that top is. And if
Mhm.
there is a credential, then we need to utilize them at the top of that credential.
Mhm.
And so I think that when I say that I use the the technician to like grab them in.
Yeah.
And then I start talking about
Yeah.
everybody. So that is the kind of the big pillar of the conversation. I lean on leadership because it's what I know. And I talk about technicians is because it's what I am. And so I think that what I bring to the table is this really unique lens of having that business background. I worked in retail leadership for many years before coming to vet med. And I know that I appear to be young, but I have a lot of years of retail leadership before I have even walked into a veterinary
Mhm.
hospital. And so I have a lot of experience leading people and experiencing just people things, right? That I brought into hospitals, and I brought into larger conversations. I also did work in it kind of behind the curtain in a corporation for a little while, so I've seen it from that end also. And so I've been able to sit in meetings and be a fly on the wall and listen. And I think part of the neurodiversity thing also allows me to see those patterns and hear the conversations and just sort of put a lot of things together so
Mhm.
that when I go to a hospital or I speak with a doctor or I speak to a team that are having issues, I'm able to kind of download some of those things and identify pieces that maybe they aren't seeing
Mhm.
and share with them some ideas and even allow them to get to those ideas just through questions, just through
Mhm.
curiosity, and poking some holes in some things that they weren't necessarily thinking about before because I've seen so many different pieces,
Mhm.
right, in so many different areas. And
Mhm.
I'm honest about what I don't know and what I haven't seen. I haven't worked in private practice, so there is a layer that I don't have experience in.
Mhm.
But that being said, I still think that there is a lot of what I have experienced that can still translate.
Of course. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I love the fact that you said like everyone to the top of their skills and then keep upskilling them until they get more and
Yeah.
more. I mean, my CSRs probably sold more preventatives and more medicine in my hospital than any of the medical team did because
Yeah.
they had developed these relationships with our clients. Most of them had over 10 years at the front desk because I mean, I didn't have any turnover in my hospital. And the clients knew and trusted them.
Yeah.
So we find out going from practice to practice, and the more consulting you do, the more you figure this out, is that some people are leveraging all their team members and they're letting them build the relationships and they were giving them some autonomy. And then others won't even let their managers do what they are trained to
Yeah.
do. And that micromanaging just has put hamstrings into the success of the hospital
Yeah.
because the practice owners can't get out of their own way. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying, I never say to practice owners, just turn it over and leave. But I am
Yeah.
saying turn it over and double check.
Yeah.
Still, but turn it over. And you don't
Yeah.
need to be doing this. If there's other things you need to be doing. And I think it's hard for practice owners, especially when they started the practice and they grew them from zero, to say to someone else, okay, now you do this part of these duties that I've been doing forever, and I don't have 100% control over all that
Yeah.
anymore. And a practice manager, I talk to them because they're frustrated. And I
Mhm.
said, look, you got to gain the trust first. You just don't. And that's the same with utilization of the technicians. I have talked to many, many, many technicians in my life and have many who are very good friends who are VTS, qualified. And one of the things that has consistently come through to me is that the programs that are available to technicians have such variance in the quality of the
Mhm.
training that
Yeah.
some come out with fantastic skills and others come out and they would have been better off probably not going to school because the
Yeah.
the school is just trying to take their money and run them through like a meat grinder. And in fact, one of my very good technician friends quit teaching at a school because she was so upset that the quality was poor and that they were not really preparing students to go out into the world and do stuff. So I want to say to technicians who have their license, you still have got to prove yourself. You still, because it's just like a veterinarian. I mean, you can go to a multitude of different veterinary schools, but that doesn't mean that when you get out that you are, top level. Sometimes it depends on what you experienced when you were in school. And other people need more time. They need more mentorship when they get out into the world,
Yeah.
and that's fine too. But don't you don't have to know everything when you walk out the door, but you have to be willing to say, I don't know, and work with people so that you learn and then they do trust you. I think one thing that I have found too, and you probably have seen this as a manager and especially in different locations, is we will hire people and then not tell the rest of the team what their skill level is. So they walk in
Yeah.
and they could say, well, this is probably somebody that we just moved up from the kennel.
Yeah.
And they'll be a licensed technician with 10 years experience, but we don't tell anybody that, right? So a lot of it falls on us, the managers, to do better. And
Yeah.
that aspect too is just that let's just talk about who we're bringing in for you and what their
Yeah.
skill set is so that they really can say, let me start to leverage things. And that's that will help us a lot. Yeah.
And sometimes you just mentioned it, it's mentorship too, right? I want to make sure that your listeners know that, I mean, you sort of mentioned it, with doctors come out of school and they have the same experience. When I talk to doctors, it really depends on the school they go to. I mean, I have doctors coming out of school that are coming into practice that have very little clinical experience in their school. And then I have doctors that are coming out of school and they are hit the ground running. They have so much experience. And so just because that just because I mean, doctors have a very similar experience as technicians do, and so you're I don't want us to lose sight of that and think that like that's only the technicians experience and their schooling. I think that that is kind of across the board, and that's why mentorship is so important. I
Absolutely.
think that the one thing that I have seen that is disconcerting or like that I don't love is when these technicians and doctors come in and the existing team is not willing to train, is not willing to help, is not willing to bring the new people along because they're scared of whatever this new person is going to do. They're gonna I, I don't understand that mindset, and so that like you're gonna lose my job because that person is coming in now. I, as a leader, look for the people that are going to like take the person under their wing and train them and bring
Mhm.
them with you. And I want people to, you know, help other people and bring them along that journey and mentor. And not everybody is a good trainer, I
Right.
don't think, but I do think that, if we're able to share our skills with others and teach them, I think that that is a good thing. And we
Mhm.
shouldn't gatekeep the
Yeah.
information. I was really, really fortunate to have really amazing technicians with me when I was just coming up in school. I think a lot of that was that I worked on the overnight. And so I was fortunate to be able to do some things that I probably shouldn't have been doing early on. But again, New York State.
Yeah.
But I was, it was, I had people surrounding me that were giving me opportunities because they wanted to see me grow. And I shouldn't say that I shouldn't have been doing, they were with me. So I was supervised.
You were supervised. Yeah.
I was supervised. I was allowed to be doing them. I was in the right place in my program. So,
Mhm.
um, but I think that there's something to that. I was given opportunities early on, and I see people that don't get those opportunities.
Right.
I see and I talk to people that are like, no, I had walked into a clinic and I was new, and they were like, why is she here? Why is she
Mhm.
here? She's a technician. Like,
Right.
use her, like train her, teach her, ask her
Yeah.
what she knows. I have managers who are not clinical, and that's challenging, right?
Mhm.
Because like you said, these managers should be able to tell the team what these people know. Sometimes the managers don't even know what to ask. And
Right.
so, if that's the case, then I think that it's up to the medical team to ask the questions,
Mhm.
right? Like, what do you know? What don't you know? How can I help you get to the place where we could all work together so that we can all know the thing?
Yeah.
And that's where leadership can set things up so that those questions can be asked in a safe way. And that's where empowering your team comes from, right?
Well, and
And I
even
think,
that's even part of the interview process, right, Suzanne?
yeah,
So, I mean, I am not a technician. I never have been. I have a degree in animal science, but that doesn't
yeah,
in any way, shape, or qualify me for nursing care. But
yeah,
I knew enough, right? And then I was
sure.
constantly learning because I am just a geek and I love that stuff.
Same.
So if I didn't know that, then I would leverage my doctors in the
Yeah,
interview process or one of my
yeah,
technicians in the interview process to say, ask them the questions. I
yeah,
don't know all the questions to ask and I don't know the right answers, but ask them the questions. And then, you hire these people and then the word spreads because it's the hospital, right? And so
yeah, yeah,
they
yeah,
spread out like the gossip goes. And everybody knows what the qualifications are. But I think the other thing that you said about gatekeeping is really important because sometimes we have people who are working in our hospitals that feel like if they elevate somebody else, it somehow diminishes them
yeah,
and that there's risk involved in that. And I had a client I was working with who had a technologist 4-year degree, and I was asking her, I said, well, can you teach, this person to do this and this person to do that? And she said, no, I went to school, I paid my money, I got my degree, and I'm not going to teach them anything. And I went, well, I went to school and I paid my money, and I'm here teaching you the things that I
right.
know, right? So why wouldn't you teach people and make things better in the hospital instead of hoarding this? Because I've always believed that knowledge hoarded is wasted. And if you share it, it becomes valuable. If you don't have to get paid for it, you just share it because it's the right thing to do, teach people stuff.
Yeah,
But that there is that mindset there that says, no, no, if I'm going to hold on to this. And I've had it, in my hospitals, I kind of inherited, a technician with 20 years of experience who wasn't going to teach anybody anything and then continued to gaslight the people who were there. So
yeah,
she was dismissed to go torment other people. And
yeah.
then
I
the whole
think,
team started to flourish after that was,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that you make a great point. I was actually just watching a video a little while ago where they were talking about building culture and this whole idea of like how leaders can't actually build culture where you actually have to bring people with the right attitude
Mhm.
in and get rid of people, for lack of a better term, with
Yeah.
the wrong attitude. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of times people are worried about, you know, dismissing people that are really skilled,
Yeah.
but hey, the skill might be there, but if you are not willing to be a team player, if you are not willing to, like, your skill does not matter if you are dragging everyone through the mud.
Right.
So I agree. And you mentioned technologists, and I love that you said that because I need to start getting better about like, I went to a 4-year school. I have
Mhm.
a 4-year degree, and
Mhm.
I never say that I'm a technologist
They're
ever,
technologists.
but
Hmm.
I am.
Yep.
And I like recently have been thinking about that a lot. I'm like, I never actually, like, I don't know why,
Yeah.
but I don't. I just lump myself in with technician. And I think that there's something to be said about people who do get that additional education.
Mhm.
So I'll just put it out there. If you're listening to this and you are a technologist, let's wear that
That's right.
proudly.
Wear the badge. And put it out there. And educate the public too. That's the other thing. I feel like and you've probably seen some of the same surveys when they ask, what does a veterinary technician or technologist do? And they think basically they bathe and clean animals and clean cages. And you're like, that's not anywhere close to what they do. I mean, yeah, do they do some
Yeah.
of that stuff? Sure. But
Yeah.
they don't.
Yeah.
They're basically the same as a nurse. And so that is always our challenge. And I don't know where you stand on the nurse initiative title, but for me, who focuses a lot of my career on communication with the public, I
Yeah.
really do like the nurse title because I'm trying to parallel what people are familiar with in their own medical experience with what happens inside the veterinary hospital. And it's funny because Dr. Sue Ettinger called me one day and she said, Debbie, how would you tell people that like their dog has cancer? And I said, well, one of the things I would say is, what is your experience with cancer? Because once a person has experienced cancer or has a family member who's experienced cancer, that sets them at a different level than somebody who's never gone through
Yes.
the drill. And as a cancer survivor, I'm telling you, there's a lot you learn in the process. So it really helps lay the groundwork for where you need to start in the conversation. And I feel like, we just miss out on so much by just not communicating the things that we need to communicate very well.
Yeah.
Um, so if so thinking about like the DEI stuff,
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about, how you kind of feel in working with Blend Vet, which I absolutely love that program. And she's been on my podcast before when she was first getting started, and I'm like, this is just great.
Yeah.
Um, I am a huge advocate for, advancing different cultures, different thought processes into veterinary medicine because I feel like you get tunnel vision if you don't
Mhm.
add different thought processes and like
Yeah.
culture and how do people come at a problem.
Yeah.
So tell me kind of your thoughts about that.
I mean, it goes back to our entire world, right? Our entire world that we live in is diverse,
Mhm.
from the trees to the grass to literally everything around us is built on diversity. So I think that this, like, making diversity a buzzword, making it a bad thing, is it totally diminishes what it actually
Mhm.
is, right? Uh, just like you said, when we bring different ideas, when we bring different can be scary for
Mhm.
some people. And I understand that because it's not what you're used to. But if we just take it from a place of curiosity instead of coming from a place of judgment, if we take it, and that's in anything,
Mhm.
right? From the fact that my brain is not the same as yours, right? Just coming from a place of questioning and trying to seek understanding your experience is different than mine,
Mhm.
and that can be translated into anything.
Mhm.
Now, I come from a lens that obviously when you look at me, you say she's a white woman, so what does she have to say about DEI, right?
Mhm.
I have biracial children, and so there is a personal aspect to DEI for me when
Mhm.
it comes to racial disparities because I have a black son.
Mhm.
And so in the current atmosphere and political climate that we work in and live in, I have some realities that I've had to face as a mother of a black son that most of my peers that look like me haven't had to
Mhm.
experience. And that is something that I have had to live with, right? And whether that's a choice or that, like, whatever you want to think of that as, it is what it is, right? That's the world that I live today.
Mhm.
And so I come from that lens. And it's not just that, right? It's also the neurodiversity. There's a lot of other things,
Mhm.
right? But that is one of my lenses. And so I just see the world from this, like, why, and question everything of like, why can't my son have the same, and my daughter, because I have 7-year-old twins,
Mhm.
why can't they have the same experiences that I've had? Why do I have to why do I have to walk around my complex where I live and have people ask me, say out loud, where are these kids' parents?
Uh-huh.
I am literally right here
Uh-huh.
because I don't look like them, right? Because
Uh-huh.
that's the world that we live in. And
Right.
so some of the experiences that I experience make me think of, like, what, just the question of why, like, why do we do this? Why does this happen? And I'm not perfect by any means. And I do screw up all the time. Because I grew up as a white female in a very white neighborhood in New York. And so I spend a lot of time thinking through a lot of this stuff and how can I not necessarily protect them, but how can I make sure that they are aware and how can I make sure that they understand? But also, how does that translate to vet med, right? Like, how can they have, if they want to be in vet med, how can they have this experiences? How could they have the ability to have the same opportunities that I
Mhm.
would have had? People like Nicole allow that to happen.
Mhm.
when I was a kid, if I were Black or brown, I wouldn't have had the experiences and the opportunities that my kids now have because of people like
Hmm.
Nicole.
Hmm.
And I associate with Blend Vet and I work with Blend Vet because the work that they are doing is so very important for these kids. And if you've ever had an opportunity to do a pathway event, like I've told Nicole, like wherever you go, I will go.
Yeah.
You have ride or die. I will be with you forever because I love that work.
Hmm.
One event has like stolen my heart forever. Like it is watching these kids light up. It's incredible. And the I just it's hard to even express why DEI is so important to me. I think that it is so hard for me to understand and wrap my head around the psychology of the bystander effect. It is hard for me to wrap my head around the psychology of uh, why wouldn't you want to belong? Why wouldn't you want other people to be part of it? Why
Hmm.
wouldn't you want people to feel good? I, it's so hard for me to understand that mindset. And I do the work and I put the work in and I talk about it because I think it's important that we continue to help bring people towards belonging and to help people understand why being inclusive is important.
Yeah. Well, for me, again, maybe it's just that problem solving logic, but I feel like the more perspectives we have, the better we can grow the profession. And if
Yeah.
when you tend to get into a tunnel, and it's sort of like a feedback loop, right? You can't get other ideas because you're just listening to the same thing. Many years ago, you'll appreciate this one. I was fussing about vet school. And I was fussing that first of all, I thought that they were not letting the right people into vet school because they had quit doing interviews. And I was seeing because I've been interviewing veterinarians for 40 years. Okay.
Yeah.
So I was seeing the change in their ability to have conversations with the public and their confidence levels and a whole lot of different aspects. I mean, why are you not interviewing people and why are you not looking at their life experience prior to letting them in vet school?
Yeah.
Because veterinary medicine is a public facing job and it's hard. And if you
Yeah.
have never had that kind of experience when you're young and you fall down and get back up pretty easy, when you're 30 and you start to try to do it, it becomes very, very challenging to learn that
Yeah.
skill set that you're learning all along through childhood. So, my point is let us bring in as many different aspects of how people live life as possible and their viewpoints and then ask them what they see that we don't see, right? Because I'm like you, I'm an old white lady and I've been doing this a long time. However, I grew up in the kitchen of a restaurant filled with black people. So I kind of grew up very comfortable around people of different colors, but there were no Hispanic people in my town. So I never knew any Hispanic people until later on. But I feel like people they don't really understand their own biases. And that's why Stephen Siddall gave me the link to the Harvard implicit bias test, which I absolutely love and recommend that a lot of people take. Because you look at these things and you go, well, I don't have these biases, but you
Hmm.
do
Yeah.
because it's the way you were raised and you don't even know
Yeah.
that you have them, but they're there. And then once you know that they're there, you can shine light on them for yourself and go, okay,
Yeah.
to my brain, stop that,
Yeah.
stop. That's not
Yeah.
that is not right.
Yeah. And there are things that, I mean, like I said, I'm not perfect. There are things that I've taken that test and that I was like, I don't do that. And then I was like, oh, I
Oh,
do.
you
And
do?
there's moments that I'll have a thought
Hmm.
and I'm like, you're having a thought.
Hmm.
It is a thought.
Uh-huh.
It is a thought that we don't actually believe,
Right.
right? Like
Yeah.
and it's like retraining your brain of like this is what you were told. That doesn't mean it's reality,
Right.
and like and
Well,
then moving along, right? Like
I used to
it's
I used to teach the Patterson classes and we were talking about biases and the things that like we look up and we judge a client as to whether they're
yeah,
right or not, right? And I said, these are stereotypes and it's shortcuts that our brain uses intentionally because we can't possibly have the time to think about every single thing that happens in our world because
Yeah.
we would be exhausted and we would never get
Yeah.
anything done. So our brain just takes these shortcuts. So that's where stereotypes come in. So you go, okay, well, all black people can dance, all gay people can decorate, women are bad drivers. So we make these blanket statements like all blondes are dumb. I mean, so if you sit here and think, these are stupid statements. They really are stupid statements because Danica Patrick is an IndyCar driver, right? I've seen black people with two left feet and white people who can dance brilliantly, and some gay people who have terrible taste. So it just doesn't make
Yeah.
any difference. People are people, and we
Yeah.
just need to go through life realizing that this is the thing that our brain does, and it's intentional and it's helpful at times. But when it's not helpful, that's when we need to realize that this is what it's doing to us and we need to stop
Yeah.
ourselves. And it's sort of like, positive intent, assuming that people are not talking badly about you or mean harm to you in some way just because they didn't speak to you this morning. Okay, what's going on in
Yeah.
their lives, right? Curiosity. I love
Right.
the fact that you're saying curiosity is so important to you because that
Yeah.
is my big red letter word is be curious. Always be curious
Yeah.
first. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's important too, especially one of the things that I taught my front desk when I was working in Westchester. So Westchester County in New York is right on the border of Yonkers and the Bronx, and there's not a lot of veterinary hospitals in Yonkers or the Bronx, and so we would see a lot of clients come up from the Bronx. People from the Bronx would either go to Manhattan or they would come up to us. And we were right on the border. And there is a stereotype that if you are from the Bronx, number one, you don't have money, which is wild because it's very expensive to live in the Bronx. And it's very expensive to live in
To
Manhattan.
just live in New York. Yeah.
Just live in New York in general. And number two, if you own a pit bull, you chances are you are don't have money, right? You're not going to pay. If you're coming from the Bronx and you own a pit bull, you are automatically you're not going to pay.
Yeah.
And so I had to teach them just because their address is from the Bronx, just because that does not mean that they can't pay. We still treat them just like everybody else, and we still give them the same options as everybody else. Like, stop. We can't do that
Mhm.
just because of what they wear and all of that. Listen, because those people that came up from northern Westchester, that the expectation is that they're gonna drive the nice car and pay for everything. Trust me, they don't always.
No,
So
that's because they
like,
have the nice car that they put themselves into hock and
right,
they can't afford anything else. That's right. Yeah.
right.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, for years, I've told this story about this Henrietta, who was a chicken who came into our hospital one Saturday morning, carried by a man who had this ratty straw hat and bib overalls. And we were kind of a rural practice, but it was a AHA accredited 11 doctor mixed animal practice that did ER. And so our staff had been taught to not judge. And so we just said, we'll try. But he'd been turned down by two other hospitals. And one of them who said, it's a chicken, wring its neck, eat it for lunch. I swear to God, this is the true story. This is a little rural practice, this old school vet out there. Are you crazy, man? It's chicken. But, we did a $1,300 orthopedic pin placement on this chicken,
Oh
and the
my
man
God.
paid it with no problem. And then we found out that he was a human physician and he worked at the hospital. And then he transferred all his 20 pets to us because we were awesome. And then went back to the hospital and told everybody there that they should bring their pets to us because of our
Just
level
never
of
know.
medical care. So you don't know who's
Yeah.
walking in your door, and you can't judge them by the way they look because one of my very best clients used to send his dogs to us in a taxi. And then when Jim would come, sometimes he was in his bathrobe because he had just gotten out of rehab. But he would he would pay whatever it needed for those dogs, those two Dalmatians, and the taxi driver would just bring them on to the hospital without him. He'd just bring the
Yeah.
dogs. So yeah, so working with the public for a long period of time teaches you that you just do not know. Just because somebody
Yeah.
looks like they got money doesn't mean they will have it or will pay it, even if
Yeah.
they do. And then
Yeah.
others who are of modest means will do anything they can to pay for whatever
Yeah.
they need to for their
And
pets.
the same goes for the people that are applying for for your practice, right? I mean, whether it be doctors or technicians or any staff that come to work for the practice, even managers, right? Just because of whatever their previous job history is or whatever, I still give them a chance to talk to them
Mhm.
because you don't know. There's transferable skills. I mean, I came from retail. If it wasn't for that opportunity, that you just never know, you
No.
know?
My very best CSRs. In fact, I never hired any CSR who had worked in another veterinary
Oh my God.
hospital
I love you.
because they all came from one of them was a retail sold shoes in a retail department store. The other one had managed a
Speaking my
dry
language,
cleaning.
Debbie.
One was an IT person, one was in nursing school. And these people were fantastic with
Yes.
people, right? They were with
Yes.
people. The other stuff
Thank
you can
you.
teach. I
Thank
mean, you
you.
can teach this stuff, right? It's not that big a deal. I mean, they're not going to go back and do surgery, right? But you can teach them vaccine schedules and what to say when somebody says, my dog ate a sock. I mean, you know the answer to that. Come now, you know.
I'm glad you said that because I can't tell you how many times I have said this to my team and they're like, no, they don't have any vet med experience. I'm like, exactly. I have
Good.
had the best CSRs are like Starbucks baristas. I've had business to business sales people. I had a girl who used to work in Chili's. Like restaurant people
Yes.
are the best
The
because
best.
I mean,
Yeah.
as you know,
Yes.
people who have to work with people in restaurants.
Yeah. That hangry thing is real. Hangry is
Yes,
real. Yes.
100%.
Yes. And
I,
that's how I grew up. And so I did hire like
yes.
for assistants, the reception. I mean, they were great in the back because a really good server understands you think before you move. And
Hmm.
every step is planned because and I'm so bad because I have grown up in the restaurant business and I worked as a waitress all through college. And when I am served poorly, I go, this person is poorly trained. I am watching
Hmm.
them literally walk themselves to death, doing one thing at a time, instead of making loops and bringing everything they can. And you're like, oh, come on, think a plan before you step out onto the floor. So that's why I do. I agree. And the other thing is sometimes I don't want to hire anybody who's worked in another hospital either because they just bring bad habits
Yes. You
and
can
bad
train them the way
attitude.
you want them. Right. You
Yes.
can mold
Yes.
them into, yes,
Yes.
100%.
One of my most proud, I guess, data points in my career is that we have hired, 9 or 10 veterinarians right out of school and trains them and mentored them to go and become practice owners. And they all, left us to go own their own practice. And for me, I think that's just something I'm extremely proud of because a lot of times I think veterinarians go, "Oh my God, I never want to own a practice because it's too much work and they're, 80-hour work weeks and you're never off but if you do it right, you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
You go to lunch, you stop at night, you go on vacation, you leverage your team, you have people in place, and you have enough people in place to take care of the business that you have. And if somebody's out of work, well, that's all right because you still have enough people in place. You don't run shorthanded all the time, and then you don't burn out the people that you have.
Yeah.
My practice owner was funny. It's a good thing that he could tolerate sassy because he was he was sharing an office with one. But he would go, good gosh, there are people hanging off the walls here on coat hooks because they don't have anything to do. I said, don't you worry about it. I'll find something for him to do. They're not going home. So he was always worried about that. But I feel like you can't run shorthanded all the time. You should have a cushion. And
Hmm.
people get sick and their kids get sick and they want to change their schedule. And I used to tell people, I said, I can't pay you a ton compared to other things, but I can make it a good place to work. I let 2 of my receptionists off work to go watch Blanche Taylor Moore get tried because she was the She was the cashier at the grocery store across the street from our practice before she killed her third husband.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, and so they were so interested in one of the receptionist's husband was an FBI agent, so she was all into crime stuff. And I went, take off, go ahead. If you want to go see the trial, go see the trial. I'll cover the front desk for you. But if that's the kind of boss you need, if you want
Yeah,
to keep your people at the front desk for 15 plus years, this is
yeah.
what you do, right?
Yeah, I mean, I talk about it all the time that some things are more than just monetary. And there's some things that, are there's unspoken things. And it's about caring for your people. It's about knowing your people. I mean, if you didn't talk to your people, you wouldn't have known that,
Right.
right? Like it's
Yeah.
about knowing what they care about, knowing what they need and doing that. And
Mhm.
oftentimes it is very small little things, right? I asked my tech supervisor if there was anything in the world that you would like for Tech Week, what would it be? And she was like, I really want a bouncy house. And I was like, are are you serious? And she was like, yeah, our old manager wouldn't get it for us. And I was like, you should have. She was so defeated. And I
Uh-huh.
was like, hold on. I looked it up. It was $250. I was like,
Uh-huh.
done. And she was like, really? I was
Uh-huh.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
that wasn't hard.
Yeah.
Like, and it was the best day ever. And it
Uh-huh.
just happened to wind up like it wound up being one of those days where everybody canceled and like
Yeah.
we wound up just jumping in the bouncy house all day.
Oh,
It
that's
was
great.
literally the best day ever. I mean,
Love it.
I'm pretty sure it was probably a very expensive day
Uh-huh.
because nobody showed up,
Nobody.
but like literally for the culture, it was so worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we
And
used
I
to
still to
have
this day talk about it because it was so fun.
events, right? And so I didn't do Tech Week. I mean, it didn't even exist for a long time, but we always had events within our hospital. And so we would have We Made It Through. That was after Labor Day because we boarded 100 animals in
Oh
our
God.
hospital from Memorial Day to Labor Day. And it was basically balls to the wall the whole time. And so by the time summer was over, we were all like, with our tongues hanging out.
Yeah.
So we would have this big party in the parking lot where everybody we'd cook, we'd bring a grill, and we would just hang out there in the parking lot and provide all the food. We At Thanksgiving, we had the Thanksgiving feast, and everybody would bring their favorite dish, and then we would provide the meat and the expensive stuff, and even the
Yeah.
kids could bring ice. I mean, that was
Yeah. Yeah.
ice in
Yeah.
paper cups. But everybody was involved in it. And then we would invite the clients to come and eat with us when they came in the
Oh,
door.
that's
And we
awesome.
had a big Christmas party. And one Christmas, our kennel staff decided that they were going to do a play. And so they made a skit. And we are in a white tablecloth, silver, fancy restaurant. They bring in a bale of hay with on a wheelbarrow, dress one of my staff members up as Rudolph in a costume, and pretend to do a physical exam on her in the middle of the dining room. We had forcing a private room. So, but that's the kind of stuff that my staff did, and that's why we had such a good time at work, and I feel
Yeah.
like and I know you come from a corporate world, but it's so nickel and dime. Some of them are, and you're like, don't you understand this is the people part of it,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
not all about the dollars of it.
Yeah.
And when you separate yourself from the people, you lose dollars
Yeah.
because you have turnover. So, we had an incredibly good um, profitability in our hospital. Why? Because they didn't have to train anybody because everybody stayed and everybody knew. And they were like automatic. I mean, they
Yeah.
just knew. And that's what you aspire to because this just became a Ferrari running down the road instead of a Yugo chugging around in the
Yeah.
ditches all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the first things that I learned in business
Yeah.
school very, very early on is that when you take care of your people, they take care of you. And I have held on to that. It was like business 101. I swear it was like the first class and the first sentence that the teacher said, the professor said. And it is like, it's like somebody took whatever those things are for cows and like stuck it in my
Oh,
brain and it has not gone away.
yeah.
And I have said it so many times that I actually worked for a company that my boss told me if I say it one more time, he basically for lack of a better term, threatened me that I better not say it one more time. And I was not there for very much longer after that, because I was like, well, then we are not aligned,
Yeah.
because I like, sorry, buddy, but that's
Yeah.
literally everything that I believe in. And
Right.
so the company that I work for now, um, my full-time job,
Mhm.
that's why I work there, because on their founders video, it's basically said
Mhm.
that, when you take care of your people, they take care of you. And I was like,
Mhm.
oh, sold.
Yep.
Because th-
Yeah. To
hello,
me,
it
it's
comes
like
down to the
duh.
people.
Yeah. It's like duh.
Wow.
You
Why
know,
is that so hard? Yeah.
I
And
know.
your hospital was profitable because you took care of your people. And I
Yes.
think at the end of the day, yes, it's a business. Yes, we have to make money. Yes, we have to keep the lights on. Yes, we have to pay our teams. Yes, that's all things that we have to
Yeah.
do, but we don't do that by micromanaging every single penny.
Right.
We and we also don't do that by giving our teams, we don't take care of our teams by giving them a pizza party every time the like one big thing falls apart. Oh, we care about you, here's a pizza party. No,
Yeah.
it's those meaningful things consistently,
Hmm.
right? It's caring about your people all the time, not only when it's convenient for you.
Yeah. And walking the floor, that's the other part of
Yeah.
it is I know that I know some friends who have remote managed, but still they go and I mean, one lived in Bend, Oregon and was managing a hospital in Chesapeake, Virginia, but she flew in and she had people on the ground there who were her like conduits of information. But you've got to walk around and know your people. And
Yeah.
they're not cogs in a wheel. They are
Right.
very much individuals. And it's like you said, how do you know what they want? Because you don't even know them. And you don't
Yeah.
even, sometimes you don't even know their names, which I think is, I mean, and the bigger you get, the harder it is. And I do agree.
100%.
It
Yeah.
absolutely is challenging. But there needs to be somebody there who does know them and know their names and can pass that information up when it's important and look after them in those sort of ways. But I mean, I laugh and say in my office when I was managing, I had what I call the therapy chair and the box of Kleenex. And I had heard everything in the world from the young girl who got an abortion and came and cried on my shoulder the next day, who didn't tell her parents but told me, and then the longtime staff member who was having problems and told me that her husband was impotent. It was really more than I wanted to know, but I
Yeah.
have to say I was grateful that they trusted me enough with that kind of information to come to me. And I certainly, I tried to help within the scope of my capabilities. But that's so incredibly important that you know your people and your people trust you
Yeah.
and then that stuff, of course, is incredibly private. And so you're not going to go out and tell that to the world. And it goes back to the integrity point that you made about you also got to be able to keep your mouth shut and
Yeah.
so your people do and can trust you with that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So Susan, I told you we would get off on a tangent, and we have. So I do want to go back and say, in your mission to innovate, um, what do you think? What influenced you the most? Was there something that triggered you to says, "Oh, I need to fix this"?
I don't know that there was necessarily one thing. I think that when I was working as an assistant overnight, there I think there was just a lot of small things that happened just over the course of my time in clinical practice. When I was
Mm,
working as an assistant overnight, and I don't know if you've ever worked in overnight, but there's definitely there's a cultural thing between overnight and day. And I just remember thinking that I never saw the leadership there. The manager was never there. There was one time that one time that a leader ever showed up. And that one time happened to be the one time I had a piece of pizza in my hand walking through the treatment room. Not that I was eating in the treatment
uh,
room, because that was a big no-no.
sure.
I'm a huge like OSHA like
Yes.
violation person. Um, Still to this day, like I've always been that way.
Yeah.
But and I got written up for it. I was like, you literally never show up ever.
Uh-huh.
This is the one, really.
Yeah.
And so I just that and like how they would have staff meetings and the food that would be left over for us would be literally scraps and the changeover would always be this like negative, like we would always feel like, oh, they just come trickling in whenever they feel like it. And then there was just always this like,
Mhm.
ugh feeling. And there was never any leadership. And then when I switched over to days, it was almost this complete opposite of like, we're so wonderful. The day is the night's so terrible.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, what's happening here? You know,
Yeah.
like, because of me being like pattern recognition
Uh-huh.
and just the way that my brain works, I was just like, what is going on? And I always told myself if I ever go back into leadership, and at that time in my career, I was like, I'm never doing leadership again.
Mhm.
But if I ever get into leadership, there are certain things that I know I can do better. And then I had the opportunity, and then COVID hit.
Uh,
Right.
oh, yeah.
So, and I got tested, right? I mean, everything I knew about leadership, everything I knew about management was tested during COVID
Mhm.
because nobody knew anything.
Yeah.
And how do I lean on all the things that I do, which is be transparent, be honest, tell you what I like, tell you when I don't know something.
Mhm.
How do you go in every single day saying I don't know,
I don't know. Yeah, I know. I know. I
right?
never, in my 40 years in vet med, I have never felt as exhausted. And I wasn't working in practice. People were just asking me, and I was writing every day, like, what's new? What can we do? I will
Yeah.
say this, that looking at the different groups on Facebook, I was incredibly proud that the managers shared all the things they were figuring out
Yes.
as they were figuring it out, and they were throwing it out there, and it was so collaborative
Yeah.
that people were going, this is how I'm doing the parking lot thing, and this is how I'm doing my signs, and this is how we're telling the client stuff. And I mean, I wrote letters and I said, send these to your clients. This is why they're upset. You're blindsiding them. You realize that you are up to your elbows in alligators. They don't know that. They're
Yeah.
sitting on board to tears. You
Yeah.
got to tell people stuff. You got to push it
Yeah.
out. And they're like, oh. And so, I mean, one of my clients sent this letter out that I had written, and clients said, well, can we help you? We'll come and volunteer to run the front desk. We'll bring you food. We'll do, I mean, because people were willing to help, but they just didn't know what was going on. And so
Yeah.
a lot of that was on us, but again, we didn't know, right? We didn't know what to do. But I felt like I was drinking out of a fire hose, honestly, every single day during that period
Yeah.
of time. It was
Yeah. And
crazy.
I just, I just leaned on the honesty and the transparency
Mhm.
and I I leaned on it, but I would tell my team like, guys, I don't know what's coming. I don't know how today's going to go. We literally woke up every day not knowing what was going to happen. We
Mhm.
were in New York, right? Like we were
Mhm.
in the center of it.
Oh, yeah.
But I knew we were going to do it together and every single day that message just was like I drove that home. We were going to do this
Mhm.
together and I think that what that taught me was that vulnerability is not weakness.
Yeah.
And I think that that taught my like I was able to learn that for myself that
Mhm.
like that was scary,
Mhm.
right? To and hard and uncomfortable. And it really helped me hone that skill of leaning into that uncomfortable, which is something I talk about a lot
Mhm.
now that I don't know that I had words for back then. But now I talk about that a lot of like, guys, we learn all of this leadership stuff, but then we don't do it because it's uncomfortable. Well, if I wouldn't have done the uncomfortable when it was hard,
Mhm.
we wouldn't have been successful,
Mhm.
right? So sometimes you have to do the uncomfortable
Yeah.
stuff in order to actually be successful. And
Mhm.
that comes with accountability, right? Like those hard conversations, they're uncomfortable
Mhm.
when you first do them. Just
Mhm.
like the first catheter I ever placed
Mhm.
was wildly uncomfortable.
Uh-huh.
Now, 11 years later, I'm the clinic vampire, right? They call
Yeah.
me when they need somebody to poke something because I was
Yes.
an oncology technician
Uh-huh.
still, right? And so I think that again, it wasn't necessarily one particular moment. There were definitely even why technician utilization. I think there were certain situations as a technician that I learned that there were certain things that I wasn't necessarily allowed to do. But then when I worked with a different doctor, they asked me to do things that I was like, oh, I can do that. And they were like, yeah, you learned that, didn't you? And I'm like, oh, yeah, yeah, I learned that. Of course, I know how to do that. I just was never given that opportunity because the doctor likes to do that. And they were like, yeah, but you can do it. So it's more efficient if you do it so I can do the doctor stuff. And like having those conversations and things kind of opened my eyes to wait, why wasn't I doing that? Because she likes it or they like it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the most efficient situation, right?
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
so it just kind of opened my eyes to some of the things, realizing that when I'm given the opportunity to do the things that I'm actually trained to do, it makes me feel better about my job. And then, hey, now that I'm in this leadership role, I can do that for others. And then now that I'm in a leadership role where I'm overseeing other leaders, I can help them do that for others. And then it just like the impact just grows. And
Mhm.
so it again, it's not one particular thing, but it just is these like culmination of all these different things that have kind of led to where I am now.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. Um, so let me ask you this, thinking about, your kind of putting yourself out of your comfort zone. Again, you're talking about doing the uncomfortable thing. What advice would you give to somebody who wants to create positive change in their own little corner of the profession, but maybe they think, oh, I don't have the experience, or oh, I don't have the credentials, or oh, why nobody will listen to me. What do you say about that?
I mean, you can't be afraid to be uncomfortable. I growth does not, this is not my words, but growth does not happen in the comfort zone, right?
Mhm.
If you if you are scared to do it, chances are it's the right thing to do. You have to sit in it, you have to reflect, you have to be honest with yourself. Half the things that I have done, half the stuff that you see, I have been scared to do. I, I posted a post. I mean, the only reason why I think you even know who I am is because I posted a post on LinkedIn. It was like, pick me, I want to speak. Right. And I have gotten all of these opportunities because I put myself out there.
Just out.
You
Yeah.
think that I was like, so I'm just like out there saying, hey guys, I want to like that's that's scary,
Uh-huh.
and it's that could fall on deaf ears, that could open up doors. What's the worst that people could say is
Right.
no?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that the wrong decision is staying quiet. If you have something to say it.
Hmm. Yeah.
What's the worst that can happen?
That's exactly right. That is exactly right. I mean, again, our brain is teaching us to be safe all the time,
Yeah,
but with safety, it is no growth and no opportunities will come to you from hiding in the corner. So,
yeah.
so many times I feel like the team members that's like, well, I didn't get a raise or I didn't get any opportunities or I did, but did you ask? Did you go out and did you lay groundwork and did you put yourself forward to say, hey, I want to do that? Because sometimes I look at stuff that I've done in my career and sometimes I just said yes without really thinking of the
Oh
consequences
yeah.
of
Oh
yes,
yeah.
right? And then looking back on it, I'm like, oh crap, what have I said yes to? But
Sure.
it usually was something that scared me a little bit. I mean, really, I can tell you that standing in front of 400 people for the first time at a podium when you are not used to speaking in crowds is scary.
Yeah.
But after doing it for 20 years, there's hardly anything I'd rather do than do that
Yeah.
because it's also a blast. And I feel like you, if you have a message you have to get it out to the most people possible. And
Yeah.
that's the most helpful thing that you can do. And if you want to start little, start in your own practice and then start
Yeah.
locally and then start, regionally and then, national stage is the next thing. If that's what you want to do. And if you don't want to do that, that's fine, but figure out what you want to do and do it. Just
Yeah.
don't let fear hold you back. That's my mantra. Don't let fear hold you back.
Yeah, 100%. A whole bunch of years ago, I was really shy, and people that know me now are like, "Yeah, right, there's no way." But I used to you mentioned in the intro that I'm a certified personal trainer, and people are like, "How did that come about?" I used to teach group fitness, and before I taught group fitness, I was taking the class, and I was like, "Hey, that doesn't look so hard." So I went up to the teacher because, hey, this is the same thing. don't be afraid, just do it. And I was like, hey, how do you do what you do? It doesn't look so hard. And she told me, and I went to the training and I met this guy, Adam, who was the trainer. And during the training, I was teaching, it was called Body Pump, is the class that I was that I went to the training for. And I was learning how to teach a squat. It's called a squat track. You basically do squats during a song and teach people on a mic. We didn't have a mic, it was broken. So I had to project me, shy, little me. I don't know how to project. And music is playing and I'm trying to squat and yell at the same time with this little voice of mine. And he stopped the music and he comes up to me and he's like, Suzanne, do you want to do this? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, then I need you to find your voice. And something about the way that he said that has just like hit me somewhere. And we started over, and it was the most electric 3 minutes of my entire life. And afterwards, he came up to me and he was like, I have never seen such an amazing performance in my entire life. He's like, do that every time. And having that experience was like a light switch. Just, I was like, any opportunity to be in front of people, just do that
Hmm.
again. And so the first opportunity to speak like this in vet med and in any kind of like it brings me right back to that moment. It's like this light switch of like, Adam, find your voice.
Yeah.
Adam has since passed away, and so it brings even more like, there's like a specialness to it, right? Of like, I found my voice because he helped me find my voice that day. And it's like, there's, there's meaning to that.
Yeah.
I would never have met him. This would never have happened if I wasn't just like, let's see what happens.
Yeah.
How hard could it be?
Right.
So you
Yeah.
just never know what doors are going to open.
It's true. You don't. Absolutely don't. Just be willing to say yes and don't be afraid.
Yeah.
You can sometimes you just figure it out on the fly.
Yeah.
It just
Absolutely.
does. Well, Susan, thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it. We went long, and so the audience, I'm
All good.
sorry if you want to listen to this for an hour and 20 minutes. I don't know. Maybe you will and maybe you won't. But we're just glad to have you and the audience with us today. And I feel like there's some valuable leadership skills training here for the
Yeah.
audience if they are interested in learning about those kind of things. And we'll have Suzanne's information and in the show notes and how you can get in touch with her as a speaker and a trainer. And again, I appreciate your time today and I appreciate the audience's time. Again, my name is Debbie Boone. This is the end of our episode of The Bend. So thank you again for listening.
Thank you.